Hi, everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and the host for the Dean's Chat podcast. My guest today is a rising star in podiatric medicine. Dr. Stephanie Oxman is a successful young podiatrist from Chicago, Illinois. In fact, she's the owner of Oexeman Foot and Ankle. She's a 2017 graduate of the Des Moines University College of Podiatric Medicine and Surgery. She did her surgical training at Franciscan St. Francis Hospital in Washington State. She also did a one-year fellowship at St. Joe's Hospital. It's called the Complex Deformity Correction and Limb Reconstruction Fellowship. That's a mouthful there, Stephanie. She has 24 publications to her name, and most notably, she started a podcast in 2021 titled She's a DPM. Welcome to Dean's Chat, Dr. Oxman.
Thank you so much for having me. And you're right, that is a mouthful. That's what, when people ask me what the title is, I'm like,
No, I get it. No problem. Well, we're kind of informal on Dean's Chat, and we go with first names. Are you okay going with Stephanie and Jeff?
I'm great with that.
All right, sounds good. Well, let's start with the hot topic of the day. When I started doing a podcast maybe 8 months ago, I found your podcast on Spotify, and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know Dr. Oxman. And then I started to listen to some of your episodes, and they were just fascinating. And I know you and I have gone back and forth over the last 3 or 4 months, and I'm so glad we're finally able to put it together. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for reaching out and having me on your podcast. I'm used to the opposite, where I'm the one interviewing, and so I'm excited to be on this end as well.
You know what I've learned, Stephanie, is that when I'm on when people are asking me questions, it's a little easier than when you're planning the whole episode.
Well, I hope so.
Well, we'll see how it goes. Well, you can't get the answers wrong because it's your story.
You're right.
All right, let's talk about podcasting. I found this just to be a fascinating experience. I've gotten to know so many people, and I've gotten to know some people that I know even better, and they'll find out things that you never knew about. So how'd you get into podcasting, and what motivated you to start? Just start with that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And if you would have told me that I would still be doing it even over 2 years later, I would tell myself I'd be very surprised that I jumped into this endeavor. I graduated from fellowship in June 2021. And decided to start my own practice. And when you're starting from scratch, sometimes you have a little extra time on your hands. And also just ending all my training, I realized there wasn't really there are still wonderful platforms out there for women, but there wasn't like a place where like you could interview or have more information on like what the women in our field are specifically doing. I was very blessed during my training that I was able to go to a lot of different symposiums and courses, and just noticed that maybe there was not always the most diverse group, or there would not be a lot of women on the podiums. And I'm like, I know that there's women out there in our field that are doing amazing things in our field. And I was like, I want to get to know them, and I want to highlight their stories, whether that's in or outside the field of podiatric medicine and surgery. So I actually recorded my first episode by myself, sat on it for maybe a month or two, because I was like, what am I doing?
Oh, that's so
and then I was like, well, if I don't do it, like, why not me? Why wouldn't I start this and be able to provide that information for my colleagues? And I started, and I haven't stopped. And it's been, like you said, you get to meet so many wonderful people.
So Stephanie, I find it interesting because I've got the ability to have the studio edit my podcast, both audio and visual. But you put everything together, right? The meat and potatoes of a podcast. Can you talk about that? Like, how did you get organized? I mean, sometimes I think that's harder than actually doing the interviews.
Yeah, great question. There's a lot people don't realize, but I usually reach out, whether that's social media, if your email, or somebody like contacts me with recommendations. I'm always looking for recommendations. So if anybody listening knows somebody that would be great for She's a DPM podcast, send them my way. But I would usually do a lot of my own like research on the person, form a Google Drive like document, and I'll write my questions so then I can let the guest see them beforehand and see if there's any other topics they want to talk about, or if they don't want to talk about a certain topic, I kind of edit towards what they feel most comfortable discussing. Then I do this Zoom chat. I would love to have a studio. Maybe that's the next step. And I'm sure Chicago may have one. And after that recording, I usually then edit the podcast through a program on my computer. So if the podcast is 45 minutes long, sometimes editing, I have to listen to it all and then editing. So it could take an hour to an hour and a half. I use Buzzsprout as my main hub to host my podcast, and it's pretty easy. Uploading and being able to write descriptions and being able to tag and then post on multiple podcast hosting platforms. It's been so much fun getting to know everybody, but it is a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
I found that too. So what kind of a camera or what kind of a microphone do you use? If that's a fair question.
Yeah, that's a fair question. And I'm a low budget guest where I use my Mac as my camera. And I bought a $40 microphone off Amazon that's been keeping me rolling. And I just make sure that I'm in a quiet area without a lot of reverb, and then ask my guests if they're able to use a microphone as well.
Very good. So Stephanie, through listening to your podcast, I've noticed that there's a lot of different common themes. But when you're interviewing for She's a DPM and it's all female guests on your show, are there some common themes that you talk about?
I think there's one of the most common themes, I think, is the different avenues of our profession and where we're able to work in our career choices, whether that's private practice or direct care, hospital, group, VA. I've tried to highlight all of those different avenues to just inform maybe younger podiatrists or even pre-podiatry students that what options are out there when we do graduate from residency or fellowship. This past year, I wanted to do a really good job of also highlighting podiatric students. So that's a common theme during the 2022-2023 season. And then what's another one? Those are two of the big ones.
I know you've interviewed a couple of my students from the Arizona College, and they were fantastic interviews. You picked some great students. Bethany, of course. Oh, they're fun. They're great. I think it's a tremendous service, not only to current students that are looking at what are my career options going forward for residency and beyond, but also for prospective students to listen to current students that are in the mix of it right now and make a very informed decision on whether they want to go into podiatric medicine or not.
Yeah, that was one of my big goals this past season was for the younger generations to learn even more about school.
Very good. Have you had any interviews that were surprising to you, that were wow, I didn't expect that? That's really great.
One of my favorite questions I ask everybody is what is a hobby or what is something that they're learning outside of podiatry? Because I find it really important to have a life outside of podiatry. And sometimes I'm so shocked at some people's hobbies that I maybe have known these people for years. And I'm like, you do what? I had no idea that you liked stained glass, or you're into barbecuing and brisket or painting. That's my favorite part of the podcast is learning what people's outside interests are.
I agree with you. And I think our listeners enjoy that too, because a lot of our listeners know the people we're talking to and they're like, well, I didn't know he played the drums, or I didn't know he's an airline pilot, or I didn't know he sails boats across the ocean to Hawaii, things like that,
that's my favorite, learning what also fires them up besides medicine.
Oh, I like that. That's a good idea. So I had a question for you, Stephanie. If there's listeners out there that haven't had an opportunity to listen to your podcast before, is there a specific podcast that you would send them to say, you got to listen to this one. This one's unbelievable?
Well, I think one of the most I really enjoyed everybody I've been interviewed, and there's different parts of each one that I've really had fun in. One of the ones that kind of comes to mind is when I had Dr. Lisa Grant McDonald and Dr. Kelsey Milanig on, because Dr. Milanig was my co-resident, And during our first year of residency, Dr. Lisa Grant McDonald was the fellow. So we all worked very closely. So it was just kind of like a reunion. And also Dr. Grant has the best laugh there ever existed. So even just think like I can hear her laugh right now, and like it just brings a smile to my face. So it was a very fun episode. If not that one, then with Dr. Adrienne Ross, I personally learned so much and like took so much away from that episode, and just tips and pearls on organizing the different facets of your career. So those are the two that jump out at me right now.
Okay. How many episodes have you done so far, Stephanie?
I should go back and count. Hold on, let me go check. And while I answer, look, what next episode would you say as if someone had to go listen to one?
Turning the tables on me here. Okay. I think if any of my listeners go back to listen or watch the YouTube of Mario Calla, Mario is a podiatric physician in Miami. And before he came to the United States, he was living in Cuba as a dentist. And he goes into detail about his lifestyle. And they knew he wanted to leave Cuba, so they put him in very difficult work situations as a dentist. And his ability to come to the United States and learn English. And he'd been a dentist, of course, so he'd taken a lot of the sciences, but he became a podiatric physician. And now he did a fellowship in Miami with Dr. Lucido, and now he's in practice in Miami. It's spellbinding. I mean, when he was telling me the stories, I was like, wow, Mario, stuff like that. So,
I'm going to have to go listen to that one for sure then.
I think it's episode like 30 or 31, right in there somewhere.
How often? I'm not going to take over this podcast, but how often are you putting out episodes?
You know what? I started out once a week. And then in the summer, I was talking to APMSA, the American Podiatric Medical Students Association. And like you, I was trying to highlight students so that any prospective students that are interested in podiatric medicine could listen to our students from all 11 schools. And when I started doing that, I found that I was putting my regular guests on Tuesdays and I was putting my student episodes on Fridays. And then I got in that habit, Stephanie, and then I've been doing it ever since. So I've been putting out 2 a week, and I try to stay, a few weeks up in advance. So for example, the episode we're recording right now, I'll probably put up first or second week in January.
That's a great schedule. Good for you getting 2 out. That's really hard to do as well.
Well, like I was telling you, I don't do the editing like you do. And then also I drive to Scottsdale, right? So I'm in beautiful Old Town Scottsdale at this studio. And so when I come down here, sometimes I'll book 2 in a row. And so when we're done with this one, I've got a local doctor coming over who's a fellowship director, and he and I are going to do an in-person interview here in the studio.
That's really great. I need to look into the studio business.
Well, there you go. Well, what I found is we're all busy, right? And you're seeing patients, and you're no stranger to work. I mean, all these publications. I was looking at your CV. I said, "There's no way Stephanie graduated from podiatry school in 2017. You've been busy."
I've been lucky that I've had a lot of great mentors and people that have helped me and let me be part of all their ambitions and papers as well. So it's been good. All
right. Well, you know what? We can swing back around and talk more about podcasting if something comes up, but maybe that'd be a good place to start. You're very successful and very young in your career, and none of us get anywhere without a lot of help. Can you talk about some of your mentors that helped you got to where you are today?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like during my residency, I was really blessed to have such a great surgical training. I feel like during my residency training, I saw and got my hands on everything almost that as podiatric physicians and surgeons that were able to, that I knew. Actually, I wasn't even planning on doing a fellowship. I was going to just graduate and start working because I felt really sound in my surgical skills and knowledge. So I have to thank all my residency attendings and my directors. I started out with Dr. Byron Hutchinson and also Dr. Craig Clifford were the main, but there were a lot of other attendings that I got to work with all 3 years, which was a big factor, and that they were able to teach me all 3 years and help me grow. And then I did end up doing a fellowship, which we'll talk about later. But I have to say, Dr. Edgardo Rodriguez is one of my biggest mentors and biggest cheerleaders. I wouldn't be where I'm at without him and his encouragement, and being able to provide me a skill set that not a lot of podiatrists have. So he's definitely one of my biggest mentors and big part of my career.
That's fantastic. So when you were in Washington, and then you had an opportunity to go back to the Chicagoland area to do your fellowship, was your plan to always go into practice in Chicago?
Oh no. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I was my husband, who's also a podiatrist, he was training in Portland at the Portland program when I was in Washington. And like I said, I wasn't always planning on doing a fellowship. We were going to graduate and find a job in the Pacific Northwest or somewhere in the Midwest. I actually never saw myself living in Chicago before, but sometimes when an opportunity arises and that opportunity, you take that opportunity, your life gets projected in a different way. And I did that, and it's only been wonderful. And I'm so glad that I did take an opportunity when it presented itself.
That's great. So even going back a little bit further, when you were in Des Moines, you went to the Des Moines College, and then did you end up doing one of your clerkships at Franciscan? Did you do the whole tour of great clerkships all over the country?
It was all over, and I drove everywhere.
Did you really?
I had to get in the car at the end of that year. Yeah. At that, Franciscan was my first month. And as soon as I got there in that first week, it like hit me. And then I was like, I could go here. I love it here. I want to be here. This is where I see myself. I kind of have a little like intuitive feeling like my whole life. So I just felt like that was a place that I could learn the best and like be able to hone my skills. So during that, I had a lot of other wonderful months and other clerkships that I could see myself at, but that one was always in my top, to be honest. I guess I can say that now. It's over over 6 years that I've graduated, and I'm not in interviews anymore, so I don't have to worry about hurting people's feelings.
No, you don't. It's interesting because when I talk to my fourth year students every year after the match, and I talk to them about this exact situation, I say, did you know you were going to go there? Did you have a feeling? And inevitably they said, oh, it's just a great vibe. I got along with everybody. I love the attendings, and I could see myself being there. And then there were other programs they could also see themselves at, but like we always say, rank your programs as you want them, and then everything kind of falls into place. So that's fabulous.
100%. Yeah, it was. I'm glad I ended up going there.
Let's delve into the fellowship training space a little bit. More and more, there's a lot of discussion about fellowships, the need for them, the benefit of them. And I think there's multiple camps. You decided to do a fellowship and it wasn't in your plans. Now that you've did a fellowship and now you've been in practice, kind of give us your experience and tell us your thoughts on fellowship and where it's helped you or if it's for some people and not others or whatever your experience.
Yeah, I think I'm like right in the middle. I think I'll explain like why I did a fellowship and like why it was best for me, but maybe it's not best for somebody else. Like my husband didn't do a fellowship and he's still a wonderful, talented surgeon. I told you that I came from a place that I felt like I was very well-rounded in all aspects, both medicine and surgery. I was at a course and I heard Dr. Rodriguez talking about peripheral nerve injuries and reconstructive options and orthoplastics and more on muscle flaps and complex wound closures and deformity correction. When he was really talking about the peripheral nerve aspect, my ears like perked up and I was like, I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know what this means. I've never seen this. I've never done it. So I actually went up to him after that course. It says, out of the blue, like, I was on a different path and I said, I'm interested in your fellowship and I would like to do your fellowship. I had met him before, so it wasn't totally crazy. But I went up to him and let him know my interest. And that just started that different trajectory. I interviewed, ended up getting the position. And I'm so glad that I took that extra year. You're never wrong getting additional knowledge and skill sets. And with mine, I feel like it's a very niche skill set that I'm very passionate about, that I'm able to now kind of fine tune my practice in as well, that a lot of other podiatrists maybe not have the interest or passion or desire to learn that skill set. So it helps set me apart. So that's why I chose to do a fellowship, for that additional training on a very specific thing. I think, like I said, if you're looking for a specific skill set or trying to expand your knowledge, then it's for you. But if you also had great training and you feel ready for what you're wanting your practice to be like, then I don't think it's always necessary.
It's kind of a pivotal time in your life, because I know several doctors that had great training, great 3 years of training, and then they got offered the job offer of a lifetime in the right location. And for them, it was a no-brainer, right? Oh, they're going to go to work, even though they were considering a fellowship. So I think circumstances change quickly.
Yes. And like when an opportunity arises and you can see that it would fit a certain aspect of your life, or like, I think you got to sometimes take it without knowing what that means.
That's fair enough. Well said. So going back even further, when did you know you were going to be a podiatrist?
Oh, this is really, I always laugh at this question because podiatry was like thrown at me and I didn't realize that it was really an option. So I played a lot of sports when I was younger, right? This kind of the story of you're an athlete, you had foot problems, went to go see a podiatrist. And
I love that story. It's so true too.
Yeah. I was 16 when I first went to go see a podiatrist and to get orthotics because I have really bad feet. And they said to me, "Are you a swimmer? Because you have paddles for feet." So that was my first interaction with a podiatrist. So solid bedside manner. It was great. And then I rediscovered podiatry in my junior or senior year of college. I literally shadowed everything under the sun. I was like potentially going to be an optometrist or a PA or PT. Stumbled across podiatry, shadowed several podiatrists in my hometown, St. Louis. Was like, this is really what I've been looking for. I felt like I hadn't found that spot, that intuitive feeling that I knew that this was like what my career and passion should be. I actually took a gap year to make sure it was something that I was serious about. Then I took a gap year and then was accepted at Des Moines University.
Wow. It's funny how that works, because when I'm interviewing students, and we're interviewing every week right now, and they fall into different groups. One is I went to a podiatrist when I sprained my ankle when I was playing soccer, or another group is I was taking my parents or loved one to see a podiatrist, of course. Others bump into podiatrists in a transcription role or medical assistant role. You just never know. And then we have another group of legacy podiatrists, and I have a bunch at our school right now whose parents are podiatrists. So they always seem to fall into similar groups.
Yes, and then hopefully you upcoming podiatrists will hear your podcast, my podcast, and that'll be their origin story.
You know what? I've had a couple experiences like that. Dr. Wu called me from Scholl College, and she sent me a snippet of a letter she got from a prospective student that said, "I decided to go to the Scholl College because I heard your Dean's Chat interview." So we do make a difference out there, Stephanie.
And it's like so great when you get those stories too. It makes you want to keep going.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. So you mentioned earlier that your favorite part of the podcast is to ask people what they do when they're not embroiled in reading journals and seeing patients and doing research. What do you do when you're not in the middle of podiatric medicine?
It's hard right now. This is what I've always said. I'm like, man, and every time I ask that question, I go, I'm really fearful someone's going to ask me that right now, because in March this year, I moved into my own office. So that was busy. I have the podcast. I am lucky that I get to go travel and do a lot of teaching. So I'm going to not lie. A lot of my time is with podiatry, but outside of it, I always make sure that I spend time with my husband and walk my dog every day. That walk with my dog every day is like best time each day, like that 15 to 30 minutes. I love going to Michigan, which is just a jaunt from where I'm at, and getting outside in nature. That always helps heal my soul. And then I found that I'm probably a serial entrepreneur, and I love starting new businesses. And that is my passion and hobby. So
I love that. That's a great passion and hobby. So what is your latest entrepreneurial venture?
well, you said this will come out in January-ish.
Yep.
So then I created a business that is for all podiatrists, and will be coming out. And if anybody's interested in learning more, shoot me an email. It is called Your Shoe List. So what's one of the number one questions as a podiatrist that we get asked every day is what shoe should I do?
Yeah.
Right. And then, if I know I either have a list or I spend time, I look at their underlying foot conditions and make my recommendations. And then they go to a store such as Bezos and send them further to the moon. And we don't really get compensated for our knowledge on different shoe gears and products. And we just keep sending them out. So your shoe list will have a homepage that people are able to create their own foot profile for what different foot conditions that then will populate a shoe list for them. Each podiatrist who's interested in being part of your shoe list will be able to have their own landing page for their practice or themselves with all the shoes and products that they're commonly not prescribing, but recommending to patients, and that they would be able to earn a small commission off of their recommendations. So
wow,
that is my newest business endeavor.
That is brilliant.
You're going to really hear it. So,
well, you know what? I can delay the release of this episode as long as you need it.
Okay, I'll let you know. But yeah, that's my bit. That's my one of my biggest things is that I think you should be paid for your knowledge, and we spend a lot of time with that, and you should be compensated for what you do.
I think that's very true. I was in practice for 17 years, Stephanie, when I was in Denver, and I did research and I was writing papers and I was starting a residency, and I was busy. I feel like I was in your shoes, many years ago, and I found an outlet also in, developing products, doing research, things like that. So I commend you for that. That's fantastic.
Thank you. And every day is something new, that you get to learn and figure out. So don't ever let anything stop you from doing something just because you don't know how to do it. I had no idea what I'm doing. And every day I do a little more to learn a little more.
Well, we're both doing podcasts, and I can guarantee you, for you, a couple of years ago, you wouldn't have imagined it. For me, a year ago, I wouldn't have imagined it. So there's a learning curve to everything, but it's exciting.
Very much.
Very good. All right. So the $1 million question, Stephanie, what would you tell a prospective student who's interested in a career in podiatric medicine?
Excellent question. And a question I always think about when I ask this question to people. It's a hard one. But I would say give yourself grace always, but also if you are dedicated and take the time and actually work hard, this is a great profession. You can make it into what you want. So if you are interested in more the medicine side, you can tailor a career straight on that. If you're interested in surgery, that's the beauty of podiatry. You can I truly think you could make it what you want and what best serves the life and lifestyle that you are wanting. For me, I knew I wanted to be able to have control of my career. That's why I started my own practice that I'm able to tailor to things that do bring me joy and I'm passionate about treating. So I would say, make sure you work hard now, and then that you can flourish when you're out of training.
Those are words of wisdom from one of our colleagues that is just out of fellowship. 2 years?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, you've done a lot. I commend you. Very good. That was great. And I echo those sentiments exactly. I tell students very similarly. There's a reason when you go to shadow doctors of podiatric medicine that they're all happy in practice, because they've been able to tailor their practice to the things they like to do. And I think that's really special. I also think it's important that when they go into podiatric medicine, they know what they're going to be. They're not going to medical school and then hoping they get into the specialty they want. So there's a lot of pros, Stephanie.
I have one other piece of advice that's just in general that I've taken with me, that when you ask people for advice, make sure you're asking people that have done the things that you want to be doing. So you're actually getting advice from people that have actually done it versus just the general population and other people's advice. Because don't let people project their fears onto you. They will. So make sure you have somebody or find somebody that has done what you're wanting to do and that you're able to actually ask and receive good advice.
That's excellent advice. So thank you for adding that. So Stephanie, we're kind of running a little short on time. I look forward to collaborating in the future. In fact, I would love I'm with the AACPM and the current chair, and I think your podcast is phenomenal and would love to incorporate your podcast into some of our student recruitment efforts if you're amenable to that.
Absolutely. I would love to be able to help any way I can.
Well, that's great. So on behalf of the profession, thank you for all you do. And thank you for sharing your story. And Stephanie, I'm going to send you one of these Dean's Chat cups.
Yay.
Because I know anybody with an entrepreneurial spirit is going to need some caffeine at some point during the morning or evening.
I'm definitely an evening caffeine kind of gal as well. So thank you. And thanks so much for having me on.
You're so welcome. So for all of our listeners out there and our viewers, if you're watching on YouTube, please become a subscriber. If you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify or Google Podcast, please give us a 5-star rating. And until next week, again, thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining me. Bye-bye, everybody.
So